Executive Director. I think most of you know me. I'm the Executive Director of Buena Vista Audubon. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Rachel Clark. And thank you, Rachel, for being here tonight. Let me pull up a quick bio. So Rachel Clark is a wildlife biologist and professional guide based in Fresno. Growing up in Fowler, Rachel began birding at 9 after spotting a Western Tanager in her parents' backyard. Today, she works part-time as a wildlife biologist for 2 environmental consulting firms and runs her own company, Central California Birding Tours. And Rachel, I'll now turn it over to you. And yeah, thank you.
I'm going to be bringing up the presentation, so if you can just give me a minute, we will hopefully get there. Oh, I don't see it here. It's not there. Let me Okay, I brought it up. Oh, okay, there it is. Now, can you all see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so I brought it up, but it's going to PowerPoint, so I've got to get.
Have you done the share screen in the drop down in Zoom?
I did the share screen.
Okay, and then it should give you a window. There you go.
Here we go.
No, that's not it. That's my husband's building. Okay, now see your screen. Okay, that's my screen. So let me bring it up. I got it. Okay. Now can you see it?
We can see it, but it just has the, it shows all the slides on the left.
Right.
And it's showing all the borders. So let's want to make that full screen somehow if we can.
You want to use that icon down on the bottom right next to the Zoom slide.
Right there.
No, further to the right. To the right.
Oh, further?
No, now to the left. Whoops.
Oh, okay. Right there.
Not that one. 1, 2,
That one.
that one.
Slideshow.
There you go.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you so much, Deborah. I really, really appreciate this. I apologize. There are some technical difficulties on my end. So I'm having to have Deborah present the slideshow for me. So I'll talk about each one as we go through it and have her advance the slides as we go along. So hello, everyone. As Natalie mentioned, my name is Rachel Clark, and I am a birding guide and wildlife biologist based out of the Fresno area. And as she also mentioned, I started birding when I was 9. And today I own a very small guiding company called Central California Birding Tours, through which I offer tours in the San Joaquin Valley, sometimes along the Central Coast, but mostly in the Sierra Nevada. It's definitely my stomping grounds, my absolute favorite region to guide in. It's home to many Western specialties, some of which I will be talking to you about tonight. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk first a little bit about the Sierra Nevada itself. From north to south, the Sierra Nevada stretches about 400 miles. It is adjacent to the Cascade Ranges in the north, and it ends at the Tehachapi's near Bakersfield in the south. The Sierra Nevadas boast an amazing array of habitat types, including, and this is definitely not all-inclusive, oak savannas, chaparral, pinyon juniper woodlands, various coniferous and mixed forests that are just unbelievably vast. Alpine meadows, lower elevation meadows that just stretch on as far as the eye can see, crystalline lakes, streams. And on the east side, you've got your high desert scrub, your sagebrush steppe, your pinyon juniper woodlands. You've got steep rocky canyons on both slopes and staggering treeless peaks along the crest that are just absolutely amazing to behold, especially in wintertime after a snowstorm. Absolutely amazing. Approximately 168 species nest in the Sierra Nevadas during the summer months, and across the range there are over 300 species. I'm not sure of the exact count, but it's over 300 that are known to occur throughout the range. So as you can see in these pictures here, this is just a sampling of some of the habitats there. It's certainly a lot more varied than what my photos would suggest, but this is just a little snippet of what's to see there in the Sierras. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so this here, these two graphics show an outline of the Sierra. The one on the left is literally just, I went onto Google Maps and just punched in Sierra Nevadas, and it shows you a rough outline of it. And then and you can see just how expansive it is from north to south as it traverses Eastern California. And then the graphic on the right shows you the crest, which is the kind of that thick line kind of bisecting the range. And on the on the left-hand side in the green, that's the western slope. And the western and eastern slopes are vastly different. The west slope, you can see it's greener. That's where the rainfall is. And it's a much more gradual slope. That's where you have, foothills, kind of more your mid-elevation ranges, and then your really high peaks. And then the east side, the right hand, where it's orange, it not only is it much narrower, but the orange kind of indicates I think it indicates a difference in habitat, but also there's a lot less precipitation over there. So it's a much drier side. And notice how much narrower it is. And that's largely because it's it doesn't have the gradual slope that the west side does. It's just a really steep escarpment. The east side is, both sides are amazing, both really unique in their own way, but the east side's really, really cool because you stand there on the valley floor looking west toward the east side of the Sierras, and you see some just stunning peaks, some sagebrush steppe, pinyon juniper woodlands. It's spectacular. So, as I mentioned, let's see here. I kind of apologize for this. I probably should have called my presentation Birds of the Western Sierra, because that's where I do most of my guiding, because the East Slope, it's one of those things that's kind of so close yet so far away. It takes, as the crow flies, it'd be a lot easier for me to get to, but as it stands, as I don't have the capability of flying, it takes a good 4 to 5 hours to get to. I have to drive really far north or really far south and drive over a mountain pass and then swing back up or back down. So I don't guide on the East Slope very much. So I guess I probably should have called my presentation Birds of the Western Sierra, although many of the species talked about in this presentation do cover birds that occur on both slopes. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into my presentation, which covers some of the more popular targets that people from out of the area want to see in the Sierra Nevadas. Next slide, please. So first up is the Nuttall's woodpecker, and I'm sure you guys get a lot of these down in your area, so it's probably not the most exciting for you guys, but it's a really popular target for out-of-staters, being that it's so range restricted. You can find this one in California and Baja California pretty much. So it's a really popular target for people out of the area. So you can see a male there on the left and a female on the right. These guys are recognized by the black and white stripe pattern on the backside, kind of white belly with some barred flanks, and that black stripe that encloses the cheek. That's one way to tell it apart from a downy. Also, a downy woodpecker has a solid or a white patch in the middle of the back that you don't see in the Nuttall's. A lot of people ask me how to tell it apart from ladder-backed. Ladder-backed is going to have a narrower black stripe on the cheek. The red in the crown is going to extend all the way to the forehead in the ladder-backed, and they're going to be kind of have. Oh, okay, I apologize for background noise. I have 2 misbehaving cats, so I apologize on their behalf. But as I was saying, yes, the Nuttall's is going to be a lot wider in the face and in the breast and belly, whereas the ladder-backed is going to be buffier overall. These guys, they inhabit riparian forests and oak woodlands, unlike ladder-backed, who prefers kind of more arid desert kind of areas. So not a whole heck of a lot of overlap in habitat there between the two species. The Nuttall's is in the Sierras. It's definitely more of a west slope species. There are some records on the East Slope, but it's not super common over there. So if you want to see this species, definitely come to the West Slope. So as far as sounds go, this guy sounds in some ways kind of similar to a white-headed woodpecker. The calls are kind of a sharp 2 or 3 noted pitic or a single pick call that often trail off into a rattle. Their drums are kind of a medium speed, sort of similar to white-headed woodpecker. So I am going to, you'll have to forgive me here. I know this is not the most efficient way to do this, but it's what I can do under the circumstances. So I am going to play their calls for you. Let me know if this is too loud or not loud enough. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to play. Okay. All right. So I'm going to play this call here. Hopefully this isn't too loud. Can you guys hear that?
No.
You can't? Okay. I'm going to move my phone over here. Hopefully that makes a difference. Are you guys able to hear that?
I'm not sure if that was actually a bird call. What do you guys think?
No.
No, yeah, I don't think it doesn't come across that well.
Does it come across? Okay. So what I'll do instead of playing it, which I had planned on doing as part of my presentation, I really apologize for that. I'll just describe it. And I do have some links down there for their sounds in the Cornell Lab of Ornithology if anyone wants to check that out. So I will go ahead and move on to the next species. So next slide, please. Okay, so next is a tricolored blackbird. Now this one here definitely is more common in the valley itself. So it's not really one that you'd necessarily come to the Sierras for, but you do find them in the Sierras, mostly on the west slope, up to about 1,000 feet in the foothills. So I did want to include that, especially, this one, it's again, very range restricted. A lot of out of area birders request this one, so I definitely wanted to include it. The breeding males are beautiful, glossy black. I've got that kind of long, sort of conical beak. And if you look at the epaulets, it's bright red and it's got that white border beneath the red, which is one surefire way to separate it from the red-winged blackbird.
Oh, yeah.
Females, which you can see here on the right, much duller overall, very dark and streaky. They look very similar to, of course, female red-winged blackbirds, but they are overall darker. And even here in California, we have the, with red-winged blackbirds, we have the California bicolored subspecies group. And those females, they're darker overall than red-winged blackbirds occurring outside of California. But the tricolored blackbirds are darker even than they are. So fun little note. And they historically nested all throughout the valley in marshes with cattails. But unfortunately, a lot of that habitat was turned over to agriculture and other developments. So they took to nesting in ag lands, which kind of put them at odds with farmers. Not the greatest situation, but their populations declined precipitously as a result of that. And so unfortunately, they're listed as threatened in the state of California. But you can still find nesting colonies today, various places in the valley, certain areas of the Central Sierra or the Western Sierra up to about 1,000 feet, particularly where you have patches of Himalayan blackberry. They really, really like that as a nesting substrate for some reason. So I'll talk briefly about their calls. They do sound somewhat similar to a red-winged blackbird. However, I would describe their calls as sounding somewhat like a sick and distressed cat. I know it's not the most flattering comparison, but it's very fitting. And that's their song and their calls. Very similar to red-winged blackbird, but I would say it almost, again, another kind of unflattering comparison. It almost sounds like they're being choked a little bit. So yeah, they've got some pretty unique sounds. I really wish I could play those for you guys, but unfortunately they're not coming through the way I would like them to. But if anyone is curious about that, you can look that up really easily on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website. So next slide, please. So next is the Rufous Crowned Sparrow. Again, this is another one that you guys can, I'm sure you can probably find in your area. So probably not the most exciting to you guys, but again, this is another really popular target for out-of-staters. This one isn't quite as range restricted as the Nuttles or the tricolored blackbird, but it occurs kind of in narrow localized sections out west. So the rufous crown sparrow, physical description, as the name suggests, it has a rufous crown. It's got a rufous stripe behind the eye, bold white eye ring, white mallards, thin dark throat stripes, unstreaked breast. This one's pretty habitat specific. They love dry, grassy, rocky hillsides with sparse shrubbery. Although I have seen them in kind of coastal chaparral areas too, which surprised me a little bit because those are pretty dense and brushy, but generally they tend to prefer less brushy areas. These guys, they're pretty sedentary, don't fly for long distances. They are, to my knowledge, I think they're ground nesters. I'm pretty sure I read that, so don't quote me on that, but they've got a really cool song. They sound a lot like a house wren, but their song is definitely more abrupt and has a kind of more sweeter musical tinkling quality. And they've got these really insistent deer, 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 deer calls that I much better at identifying than I am at mimicking. So you'll have to bear with me on that one. And in the Sierras, these guys are found mostly on the west slope and generally up to about 2,500 feet. So if you want to see these guys in the Sierras, you'd want to kind of stick to the foothill areas for that one. So we're going to move on to the next species. All right, thank you. So this one is the yellow-billed magpie. This is a hugely popular target because essentially, well, it's endemic to California. So out-of-staters, I can probably count on one hand the number of clients I've had who have not had this as a target. Like virtually everyone has. So these guys are large, so as far as corvids go, not the largest. I mean, I'd say most of their length is made up by their tail, but so yeah, long-tailed, very flashy with that kind of white, kind of glossy blue-black, and of course the yellow bill, which really, really stands out. So they have that yellow bill and kind of bit of a kind of thin stripe of yellow skin beneath the eyes, and they are particularly flashy when they fly. The white in the wings really, really stands out. These guys are, like other corvids, very social, very loud, very raucous. So people up in the North Valley where these guys occur all the time probably see them as more of a nuisance, but for people out of the area, they're just super, super exciting. These guys can be found in like open oak woodlands, kind of open oak grasslands, and definitely in suburban areas, parks, gardens, backyards, neighborhoods. And so it's kind of weird. Some people might say it's a little weird that I included this species in this presentation because it's more of a species you'd go to the valley to see. They're known for occurring in the Central Valley and in sections of the Coast Range as well. But I did include them because you can find them up to 2,000 feet on the west slope and kind of in the north will be like the north central Sierra. So I did want to include them because they do occur there. And as far as our sounds go, as these are corvids, they don't have any true song. They have these repetitive chatter calls that I don't imitate very well. I don't imitate any bird sounds very well. I'll just put that there right now. These raspy kind of nasal rec calls and these wank calls, which I said again, I really wish I could play, but unfortunately, it's not coming through. But yeah, very distinctive sounds. But if you're in an area where they occur abundantly, it might be something you get a little annoyed by. All right, so we're going to move on to the next species. So this is the band-tailed pigeon. This one right here, definitely a mountain-dwelling species of Western North America. And as you can see in the graphic on the right there, they also occur in Northern South America as well. They nest in both wet forests, especially in the Pacific Northwest, and dry mountain forests in the more southern part of their range. These guys are identified by, of course, their large size. They've got these kind of purplish-gray underparts. Kind of a darker gray backside, They've got that kind of yellowish bill with a dark tip. But also, if you look at the back of the neck, they've got that kind of greenish, sort of iridescent feathering and that white collar. And the tail, it has, and this is how they get their name, it's got this really broad, kind of pale gray band that's fairly obvious when they fly. So that's why they're called band-tailed pigeon. As I mentioned, yes, they breed in wet and dry mountain forests. In the Sierras, they're found in habitats mostly with acorn-producing oak. So they're typically where I see them is mostly on the west slope, and mostly, I'd say, probably about mid-elevation, where you've got those kind of where you really don't see them in, at least in my area. I never see them in forests that are purely conifer. It's always going to be oak or mixed oak and conifer forests, as they rely really heavily on oak producing acorns. As far as our sounds go, they sound a lot like an owl. Actually, it's kind of a low kind of baritone hooting sound. They also make some croaks and some really unflattering guttural sounds as well that I wish I could play for you, but unfortunately cannot. These guys tend to be really, really social and fly around in some fairly large flocks. All right, so we're going to move on to our next species. Now this one here, I'm pretty sure this is one that you guys can see pretty high numbers in your area depending on the year. Some years these guys are really abundant in some areas, and some years not so much. So the Lawrence's goldfinch, another really, really popular target for out-of-staters. Such a beautiful, distinctive species. The males, of course, on the left here, got that really distinctive black mask, that gray body with that yellow breast patch, that yellow and black in the wings. And the female here on the right, considerably duller, but still really distinctive looking with that overall grayish color, that yellow in the wings. So both really, really easy to distinguish from the lesser and American goldfinches that also occur here in California. These guys, they inhabit open here in the Sierras. Typically, I see them in weedy fields, open oak woodlands, sometimes in chaparral. They usually nest near water. I've seen them higher up as well. I've heard them singing from giant sequoias, which I personally was really, really excited by, because typically I would see and hear them at lower elevations. Now, this is a species, as I mentioned, very nomadic. Some years they might be really, really abundant in an area in one year, and the next year they're absent. So their movements are a little hard to predict. And someone once said to me, you can't really go to Lawrence's goldfinches. You have to kind of let them come to you. And a lot of times that's really, really true, unless, of course, you know where they're nesting. And as far as our sounds go, this is one of those birds that I always get really, really excited when I hear singing. They have, or calling, they have some really, really cool songs. They are very skilled mimics. In fact, their songs consist largely of imitations of other species' songs and calls. I've listened to them and picked up things like western bluebird, lazuli bunting, rock wren, oak titmouse, white-breasted nuthatch. I even picked up a brewer's sparrow, which I was really surprised by, which I thought that was really cool. It's amazing what they can imitate. But what makes our song distinctive is that they throw in enough of their own diagnostic calls to make the song recognizable as their own. And as far as their calls go, that are it's all unique and distinctive, they have these really high kind of two-noted tiku calls that, again, I can't imitate very well to save my life, but definitely go on to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's website and listen to that. Their calls, yeah, very, very, very distinctive. And this is one of those birds too, where I've, been out guiding, and I've heard one and announced it. Oh, there goes the Lawrence's goldfinch, and they're just flying overhead and will not allow themselves to be seen. So they've made me look perhaps a little dishonest on more than one occasion, but they're beautiful, they're cute, so I'll forgive them for that. So we will move on to the next species. So this one here is one that, so I don't bird a lot down in your area. So, but I'm sure, I'm pretty sure anyway, based on what I can see in the map. So this is one that breeds in your area as well. So the lazuli bunting, these guys, the breeding males are here on the left in the center. Absolutely beautiful. It's got that bright blue cap, some bright blue on the back, white in the wings, that kind of a rusty breast patch. Yeah, absolutely stunning. Females and immatures, which you can see down on the right. A much duller version of what the males are. If you look closely enough, you can see some hints of blue, but it's never anywhere near as brilliant. These guys here, they inhabit like brushy hillsides, thickets, post-burn areas, streamside areas. One thing I've noticed, I apologize, my cat keeps jumping in front of me. One thing I noticed is that you're not going to find them deep in the forest. They inhabit fairly open areas, and we here in the Central Sierra, we unfortunately have a lot of post-burn habitat where there's a lot of standing snags, a lot of kind of open brushy areas. And this time of year, you can go out there and you can stand in one spot, and it's not uncommon at all. Not uncommon at all for there to be a good 4 to 5 counter-singing male lazuli buntings that you can hear from one area. So really, really common. I said in open areas, right habitat, right time of year. Someone once told me that they thought of them as junk birds because of how common they were in those areas. I was a little offended by that, but yeah, they can be right place, right time. These guys can be really, really common. And as you can see in the graphic here, they nest mostly in the western US and a little sliver of southwestern Canada, but will spend their winters mostly kind of on the western slope of Mexico. As far as their songs go, they have a fairly distinctive, it's a very bunting-like song, I should say. Somewhat similar to the indigo bunting song, but I'd say it's perhaps a little more abrupt. It's a series of buzzing, kind of warbling notes. Their calls, again, are similar to other buntings, kind of a dry pick that's at least to my ear, sounds a little similar to one of the calls of the California quail, and an abrupt, buzzy flight call that sounds like, what you'd hear from the other bunting species as well. Again, I really wish I could play that, but unfortunately not able to. So we're going to move on to our next species. Thank you so much. This one here, the wren-tit. This one, I'm sure you can find pretty abundantly down in your area, but I included it because it's, very range restricted and a very, very popular target for out-of-staters. As you can see in the map there, they are restricted to Oregon, California, and northern Baja California. This species is highly, highly sedentary. And from what I've read, they're not known to fly more than 1,300 feet from where they were hatched. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the map trying to see, do they ever occur in Washington? And from what I've read, they don't. And that's because they won't cross the waterway between the two states because it's too wide. So you, from what I've read, you will not see these in Washington state. So yeah, very, very sedentary, very range restricted. As far as physical description goes, the sexes are identical, kind of a large-bodied, plump, long-tailed, stubby beak, kind of brownish overall, kind of lightly streaked breast. And this is one, I'm sure as you guys well know, they are the voice of the chaparral, a coastal scrub, and other dense shrublands, and they are much easier to hear than to see. And this is one I always tell clients, we will definitely hear them, but seeing them will be a challenge. And if you're trying to get a photo, you need to be quick on the draw because, they come up for a second and then they hop right back down. So as I'm sure if anyone with any experience with this species is, very familiar with that behavior from them. As far as our songs go, of course, I'm sure as you guys well know, very, very distinctive. Both sexes sing. The male song consists of 3 to 5 high pit notes, which lead to that distinctive accelerating trill. The females sing as well, but her song only consists of the pit notes, and she doesn't have that accelerating trill. Both sexes utter a harsh, grating trill, which is not terribly dissimilar from the call of the ruby-crowned kinglet, but I'd say that the wren-tit's call is definitely harsher and more grating. Both sexes will sing throughout the year, but they do sing more during the breeding season. All right, well, so we will move on to the next one. All right, so the northern pygmy owl. This one is a very popular target, but I always tell clients, I won't base tours around owls because that can get extremely tricky. So I will tell them, we'll go to the right areas to see and hear them, but it's definitely not guaranteed. So the northern pygmy owl, absolutely adorable species. As you can see in the map, it is found mainly in Western North America, a small portion of Central America. They're year-round species throughout their range. They are very small, just slightly larger than a can of soda. But I always tell people, don't let their small size fool you. These guys are tiny but mighty. They can take down prey that are up to 3 times their size. So they're a lot more fierce than they look. So they can be identified, of course, by, as I mentioned, their small size, kind of the longish tail. They're kind of brownish overall with some light speckling on the head and on the backside and some light streaking on the breast and piercing yellow eyes. And one thing that you'll notice outwardly on this species is that unlike many other owl species, it lacks those flattened facial discs that most of them have to aid in locating prey by sound. And they also lack, of course, you're not going to see this by looking at the bird, but they also lack the asymmetrical ears, which are also an adaptation for locating prey by sound. And the reason for this is that northern pygmy owls are primarily day active. So they are going to locate their prey by sight rather than by sound. So these guys inhabit deciduous and coniferous woodlands. And the Sierras, I typically find them in oak woodlands. I'd say kind of in mid-elevation areas from up to the foothills to the lower conifer zone. Actually, I see them mostly in mixed woodlands where you have a good mix of both oak and conifer. And my experience with this species is I'd say for every 10 that I hear, I maybe see one. They're really good at hiding in plain sight. So luckily, some clients of mine have been satisfied with just hearing them and have put them on their life list based on that. With that, some people are a little more stringent in their requirements, regarding, what they'll actually put on their life list or not. So, and this one, I'll never guarantee a client that they'll see this one, but I always do my best. Their song is a series of evenly spaced hollow toots. They sound actually quite similar to their song. Their toots sound very similar to the calls of the Townsend solitaire. They're both single notes that are evenly spaced, but I would say that the Townsend solitaire's calls are perhaps a little higher in pitch. These guys also sound really similar to the northern saw-whet owl, but of course, this northern saw-whet owl is a night active species, and whereas the northern pygmy owl is day active, so that kind of helps right there too. But if you're listening to a recording and you don't know whether this was recorded at day or night, one thing to pay attention to is the speed of the calls. The northern saw-whet owl tends to deliver its calls in more rapid succession, whereas the northern pygmy owl, it tends to be a little more spaced out. So just fun little thing to note there about their sounds. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So mountain quail. This is yet another one where I tell my clients, we will definitely, especially if they're here, during the breeding season, we will definitely hear them. but getting eyes on them is extremely tricky. These guys are super skittish. California quail, they can be somewhat skittish, but they're willing to come out in the open and forage and do their thing, even when they know humans are present. Generally speaking, that's just not the case with mountain quail. So these guys can be identified by, of course, their large, plump bodies. They're kind of a blue-gray head and back, kind of brownish lower back, that chestnut throat, bordered in white on either side. The chestnut sides with the really kind of broad white stripes going through them, and the two straight plumes on top of the head. So I always tell people, the California quail, they've got that forward-facing plume. It's kind of heavier on top. Not so with the mountain quail. It's just thin and sticks straight up. The sexes are similar to one another. I say the males have kind of a more solid blue neck or back of the neck, whereas the females, it's a little more brown. But getting to see that feature, good luck. They are, so tricky. These guys love montane chaparral, open forest, typically with a dense understory, because they will scoot around on the ground. You hear them next to you 1 second, and they know you're there, and they just are gone under the cover of that dense shrubbery, and you are none the wiser. You just all of a sudden stop hearing them. So, like I said, dense brushy forests, rocky slopes. Here in the Sierras, they're found on both slopes. On the west side, I can hear them, or I see them when they do move downslope during the winter to escape harsher conditions up higher. So I do sometimes hear them in the foothills, but during this time of year, mid to high elevation, so kind of lower, I say high foothill to upper conifers, where I hear these guys on the west slope. They have their sounds is 99.9 times, out of 100. That's how I identify them, or how I know they're there. Their song, which really isn't much of a song, it's this loud, far-carrying quark sound, which I imitated absolutely terribly. But yeah, it really carries throughout the surrounding forest and other surrounding habitat. A really cool and very distinctive sound. Excuse me. And they also have their alarm and contact calls are also pretty distinctive. They've got this kind of repeated whit 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 sounds, and these kind of drawn out repeated nasal sounds that they give as alarm calls. So really distinctive sounds. And I say every year for, I probably can count on 2 hands the number of them I actually see, but the number of them I detect is much, much higher. So really tricky species, but well worth the effort if you're willing to, take your time and stake out a spot and wait for them to come into view, because they're absolutely beautiful. And as you can see from the map, they're very range restricted, very localized mostly in California, a little bit of Baja California, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho as well. Yeah, so very popular target for out-of-staters. All right, so we will move on to our next species. This here, the American dipper, North America's only truly aquatic songbird. This one, not super range restricted, as you can see from the map there. You can find them down in sections of Mexico and Central America, and some pretty large portions of Western North America, all the way up to Alaska. But again, very popular target for people who are out of the area. These guys are recognized by their small yet very round bodies, their stubby tails, their kind of grayish brown plumage overall, that kind of thin beak. Breeding birds have a darker beak, whereas non-breeding birds have a paler beak. Non-breeding birds and immatures have some really thin white barring on the breast, which you have to be fairly close to see. These guys here are found along rushing mountain streams in the Sierras. They're generally found at kind of mid to high elevations. You won't find them, up above tree line or anything like that. But as I mentioned, yes, I love rushing mountain streams. They can be found on both slopes. This is one, they have some really cool sounds. So quite often you will hear them calling or singing well before you see them. They have a really, really cool song. It's kind of a repetitive sort of mimid-like quality to it. They have these really, really raspy and repetitive calls. A lot of times I will hear that before I even see them. I'll hear that call and I'll see one flying up or down the stream and I'll watch for it to land. And they have this habit of kind of bobbing up and down as they move about over the rocks. And as I mentioned, they're North America's only truly aquatic songbird, so they'll actually swim underwater in search of aquatic insect prey. Absolutely amazing species. And so this one on the left here, this is actually a fledgling that I photographed about 5 years ago. I was able to hide behind a tree and it was comfortable. I was able to get fairly close and snap some pictures. And then the one on the left there, that one is an adult. As you can see, both of them have stubby tails, but the one on the left has a slightly longer tail. Sorry, the one on the right has a slightly longer tail, whereas the one on the left has an extra stubby tail. So, and it looks a little shaggy too. And it's got that kind of fleshy gape too. All those things telling us that that one is a juvenile. All right, so we will go ahead and move on to our next species. Now this one is this is hands down the most elusive species in this presentation. This is the Yosemite subspecies of the great gray owl. So as you can see on the top right graphic, these guys are pretty widespread worldwide. You can find them in the northern part of North America as well as the northern parts of Europe and Asia as well. But as I mentioned, this is the Yosemite subspecies. So this one is found strictly in and around the Yosemite area, and it is listed as endangered, unfortunately. Great gray owls in general, they're recognized by, of course, their larger size. They are the largest owl in North America by height. They've got that kind of mottled silvery gray and brown plumage, which blends in very well. Those large facial discs and those really piercing gray eyes. And the Sierras, one in general, they're found in mature coniferous forest, typically near large meadows. This here is a Yosemite subspecies, so they breed in the lower and upper conifer zones in the Sierra. I don't think they're found on the east slope. I think it's pretty much strictly on the west slope. If they are on the east slope, I don't believe, I think there's only a handful of records on the east slope. But yeah, these guys are very, very elusive. This is one that I know has bred in a certain area of the Sierra National Forest, just south of Yosemite. People have asked me many, many times, oh, where did you see it? Where did you see it? This is one I'm going to use the term gatekeeping. I know some people kind of see that as a bad thing. And when people, withhold that information from others, really wanting to see a bird. But in this case, I kind of felt it necessary because my worry was that a lot of these people would want to come in there, and get a photograph of which, everyone wants to get a photograph. I completely get it. But this is one, it's so rare and, and it's endangered. We don't want to do anything to harass it. And my worry is that some of these people would go in there and do playback and do other things to bait it. And that's not something that we want to do. And as I mentioned, they are endangered in the state of California. And it's estimated that there may be as few as 200 to 300 great gray owls within California, and about 65% of those occur in the Yosemite region. So these guys, highly localized, highly sensitive. So I'm going to do everything I can to protect them. They are, excuse me. What's really cool, one really cool thing about them is they're actually equally likely to hunt day or night, and they often call during the day as well as at night. I've actually heard this particular pair, well, this breeding pair that I found in this one area, call during the day once. I was absolutely tickled pink by that. I thought that was really, really cool. And this one on the right, that's a young that they successfully fledged last year. So that was really cool. Got to hear it vocalize as well. But they have some really, really cool and sort of ghostly sounding calls. Their courtship call, it consists of 5 to 10 low muffled hoots, very baritone, very low, so low, in fact, that some people might not be able to pick up on that. But as I said, it has kind of almost kind of a haunting and ghostly quality to it. And they also gave these soft double hoot calls as well. And of course, these guys they'll nest in like broken off snags. Sometimes they'll even reuse old nests that hawks built. Sometimes they'll nest in the top of giant sequoias. And interestingly enough, just a fun little tidbit is that this particular subspecies here, they actually occupy the southernmost reach of the bird's worldwide range. If you look at the map there at the top, yeah, here in California, there in the Yosemite region, that is as far south as they go anywhere in their range worldwide. So not only is it a, geographically and genetically distinct subspecies, it's the southernmost population. So just thought I'd throw that in there. So that's really, really cool. I have taken people in the area where I know where these guys sometimes breed, but I typically don't tell them beforehand. So I figure if we do see it, it'll be a nice surprise, but I don't want anyone to be expecting that. So yeah, really, really, really cool species, but I haven't spread the word far and wide about where exactly I found them. So, all right, so we'll move on to the next species, which is the black-backed woodpecker. Definitely not what I'd call a Western specialty, as you can see in the map there. They occur across a pretty wide swath of the boreal forest. They go all the way up into Alaska and parts of the Northwest. And this is another one where they're in the Sierras. They reach the southern extent of their range. So these guys do tend to be pretty elusive. So this is another very popular target for people from out of the area. These guys, as their name suggests, have that entirely black backside. They have barred flanks, a white belly and throat, a white cheek stripe, and males have a yellow crown patch that females do not have. These guys can be found in mature evergreen forests. They're known for inhabiting burned and insect-infested forests. They're more common on the west slope, on the wetter side of the Sierra, than they are on the east slope. Their call is a sharp, single-noted pick that's given on repeat, and they also have these really distinctive kind of rattle snarl calls. Their drum is kind of long with an accelerated quality, and it has this really kind of subtle way in which it sort of trails off at the end. Again, I'd love to play that for you, but not able to do that, unfortunately. So we are going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. This one here is the McGillivray's warbler. These guys here are recognized by their small size, that bright yellow underside, kind of olive greenish backside, dark gray cap, especially in males, and those really distinctive arcs above and below the eye. Females are very similar to males, but they're duller overall. So you can see the female on the right. She's got that kind of duller gray cap. The eye arcs are still pretty distinctive, but they don't really stand out quite as much as they do in the male. Another thing to look for is that they don't have any wing bars. I always tell people to look for things like that when differentiating between warblers, because sometimes all you're going to get is a fleeting glimpse. So if you can tell whether or not it has wing bars, that can go a long way toward, narrowing down the potential candidates. These ones here, they're known for inhabiting kind of brambled habitats in mixed and coniferous forests. They absolutely love montane chaparral. So you get into these dense evergreen forests and you find a nice forest clearing where there's a bunch of a thorny scrub or, just dense shrubbery. That's where you're going to find these guys. And the Sierras, they breed in both the lower and upper conifer zones, and they can be found on both slopes. This is another one that can be a little shy. However, they're not as shy as your mountain quail definitely a little more willing to, excuse me, to come out and let themselves be seen, especially when males are singing. They typically sing from down lower. However, sometimes they will assume a higher perch, but they've got this really, really cool, distinctive song. It's very distinctively two-parted. It's this rolling trill. The first part is less burry than the second. And they also give these really sharp smack calls. In fact, I often hear those from females who are near a nest. And that's a lot of times that's with the females anyway, that's the first clue to their presence. These guys, yeah, they do, like I said, they do tend to be a little shy, not as much as mountain quail, but definitely easier to hear than to see. But that said, if you are in the right habitat, right time of year, these guys are super abundant. In fact, right now in the Sierra, in the Central Sierra, these guys, in montane chaparral habitats, these guys are here, there, and everywhere. I did some birding today, and I probably, across all the different places I visited, I probably counted about 15 or 20 of these. So they're not always the easiest to see, but definitely very, very abundant and very popular target for out-of-staters. And as you can see in the graphic there, they breed in far western Canada, kind of the northwestern U.S. and overwinter mostly in Mexico. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to add about this species? I think I pretty much covered all of that one. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next species, which is the, go back one slide, please. Okay, white-headed woodpecker. This is a very popular target for out-of-staters, super popular. This one, again, very range restricted. As you can see in the map there, they're pretty much confined to a section of far western North America and kind of some scattered localized areas. You can find them in far southwestern Canada. Looks like pretty much just in BC, Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California. Maybe a teeny, yeah, it looks like, yeah, I don't think Baja California, but definitely, yeah, some northern and southern central, northern and southern California. But yeah, these guys are, I mean, I'll pretty much this time of year, pretty much all tours I do, this is a species that someone wants to see. Unfortunately, they're fairly easy to locate in the Central Sierra. They love pine forests, and the Sierras they're found year-round in the lower and upper conifer zone. They breed in dead snags. They are, of course, very aptly named. They have that white head. Males will have that red stripe in the rear of the crown that females do not have. Other than that, they're going to have that all black body, a little bit of white in the wings. And one thing that I tell people to look out for when these guys fly is, of course, that all black body. They don't have any white on the belly. They don't have a white rump patch. So noting those two features, if we just see them fly by, we can eliminate possibilities like acorn woodpecker, Williamson sapsucker, black-backed woodpecker. So if you see a all black body, no white in the belly, no white in the rump, just a little bit of white in the wings, you know that you've got a white-headed woodpecker. They've got some pretty distinctive calls. They have these sharp two-noted peak calls. Again, I can't imitate them very well. These calls often lead into a drawn-out rattle. Then that drawn-out rattle sometimes can sound fairly similar to the one given by hairy woodpecker, so I have to listen to that really, really carefully. Their drum is fairly soft. It's pretty similar to that of the Nuttall's woodpecker. I'd say it's probably about a medium speed. These guys are found on both slopes. I can find them, very easily throughout the Sierra and Sequoia National Forest, the primary areas where I guide in the Sierras. And also, I can find them at higher elevations on the east slope as well. For instance, I went to the Mount Whitney portal area last fall. It's an area I highly recommend visiting. Beautiful, beautiful area on the east slope, and found a fair number of them too. So again, if you're in the right habitat, right time of year, this is definitely a species that you can pick up on, but definitely helps to know what to listen for before you go out and look for them. Otherwise, they can be somewhat easy to overlook. But they can also sometimes be a little bit elusive too. I've had clients really, really want to see these, and they just, for whatever reason, just weren't in the area where we were looking. But for the most part, they're pretty dependable in on the Western Sierra, at least for me in the areas that I live. All right, so we're going to move on to our next species, which is the Hermit Warbler. So I'm sure as birders, you've probably all heard the phrase warbler neck. Well, the Hermit Warbler is going to give you warbler neck like no other. These guys are absolutely gorgeous when you can get a look at them, that is. They're recognized, well, the males have that white belly, black throat, bright yellow face and forehead, kind of the grayish backside of the white wing bars. The females you can see on the right here, still beautiful, but it's kind of a duller version of her male counterpart. She doesn't have that black chin. She's got a duskier cheek. Yeah, she just doesn't stand out quite as much as he does. These guys prefer coniferous forests with well-developed canopies. These guys are known canopy dwellers. This one has presented a pretty unique challenge when trying to get clients' eyes on them because they're so high up. I mean, they're the right place, the right time of year. They're very abundant, but getting eyes on one can be really, really challenging and requires a lot of patience. Again, as I said, warbler neck is definitely a thing. And with this species, if you're trying to get eyes on them, you will find that out very, very quickly. They have their song, I'm trying to think how to accurately describe that. It's really tricky because it's so variable and there's kind of a lot of overlap between other species in the same genus. So especially like Townsend's warbler, black-throated gray warbler, they both have very similar sounding or fairly similar sounding songs. Not identical, but there's some overlap there. I say the black-throated gray is a little buzzier overall. The Townsend's I'd say is perhaps a little less buzzy overall, but it varies. It can depend on the time of day, time of season. So it can be really tricky. One thing I've noticed is that it's typically a two-parted song with kind of a high warble at first that ends in a buzzy phrase. I was hearing one sing today. The first part of it sounded very yellow-rumped warblerish, but then there was just that little buzz at the end that told me, okay, that's a hermit warbler. Definitely not a yellow-rumped warbler.
Sunshine is for? What is that for?
That, I don't, that's the brightness of this,
Oh,
that's just the volume.
And so that, oh, you turned it down so you can't
Can
hear.
somebody do their audio? Okay.
Nice, thank you.
Are
And
you
so, yeah,
ready for the next slide, Rachel?
just about, I think there was one more thing that I was going to add about this species. Oh, a fun fact about this guy is that these guys were a little misnamed when ornithologists were first describing them. They were assumed to be kind of scarce, kind of, I guess, kind of few and far between and not very social. And that's just really not true. If you're in the right habitat, right time of year, like this time of year on the west slope of the Sierra in, kind of in these coniferous forests with well-developed canopies, these guys are going to be very abundant. In fact, I was birding in one area today. I probably had within maybe a quarter mile, I probably had at least, I'd say, and this is probably an underestimate too, probably 4 or 5 different singing males. So they're a lot more abundant than they were initially thought to be. And not only that, they can be fairly social, and during migration, they'll actually join a mixed species flock. So the hermit warblers aren't quite as hermit-like as they were once thought to be. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next species, which is the Cassin's finch. This is a really fun species. They definitely occupy higher elevations. But I'm going to talk first a little bit about their physical appearance because they look very similar to the purple finch, and people often ask me how to differentiate between the two. And the short answer is that the Cassin's finch, they have a more peaked crown, and you'll notice that the crown is a really, really bright raspberry red, and that's brighter than anywhere else on their body. So take note of that. Really peaked crown, really bright raspberry, and the raspberry coloration in the crown stands out in contrast to everything else because it's super bright. They have definitely a straighter beak than purple finches do. They have a thin, both male and female casting finches have a thin white eye ring that you don't see in purple finches. Male casting finches will have less red on the backside than male purple finches do. And then the females can be a little trickier, but on the whole, female casting finches are going to have a paler breast with thinner, more crisp streaking. And of course, they have that, as do the males, the straighter beak, a thin white eye ring, and a more peaked crown. So yeah, so these guys, high elevation specialists, as you can see in the graphic here, fairly range restricted. They're found year round in a fairly broad section of the Western US, a little small corner there of southwestern Canada. And some populations will overwinter in portions of Mexico. In the Sierras, you'll find this species in high elevation evergreen forests, typically upper conifer and subalpine, so really dense high elevation evergreen forests, and then some even higher ones just below the alpine zone where you really don't have very many trees. So they're really, really fun to look at and listen to. They have, their song is this beautiful, bright warble, fairly similar to the purple finch song, but excuse me, I describe it as having, compared to the purple finch song, having less of a rolling echo-like quality. It's just clearer. These guys are also some very skilled mimics, both purple, and that's true of both the purple and the Cassin's finch. Not true of house finches, but yeah, purple and Cassin's finches, both very, very skilled mimics. Their songs don't always include imitations of other species, but they often do. And when they're mimicking, one thing I've noticed of the Cassin's finches is they generally, there is some overlap at mid elevations, but generally they occur higher in the mountains than purple finches do. So you'll notice when they're mimicking, when you pay attention to the species that they're mimicking, the purple finches, they'll imitate like the slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch, western bluebirds, and all these species that are found at lower elevations, where the Cassin's finches will imitate higher elevation species. So it's a really, really cool thing. They have these diagnostic, and I'm going to try to imitate this and do a terrible, terrible job of these diagnostic wee calls. If you hear that, you know that you have a Cassin's finch. They also have these, again, I'm going to try to imitate it and do a terrible job. These kind of zip flight calls, unlike the pick sounding flight calls of the purple finch. I know that's a lot of information I'm throwing out. And again, I really wish I could play that for you. But yeah, really, really fun species. You'll find them in a lot of forests dominated by lodgepoles, western white pines. Yeah, definitely, as I mentioned, yeah, high elevation specialists. But they do move downslope during wintertime to escape higher elevation, to escape harsher conditions at higher elevations. All right, so we're going to move on to our next species.
Take the sound away from us.
Okay. And this is, of course, the Williamson sapsucker. This one, although it's, I guess you could say, sort of widespread in Western North America, it's fairly localized in its range.
Sorry. Muted.
Oh.
Sorry, Rachel. Somebody has their sound on.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. So these guys are fairly localized in their range throughout Western North America.
Yeah.
A very popular target for people out of the area. These guys tend to be fairly elusive. They don't always make a lot of noise too, which kind of compounds the difficulty. If you notice here, so the male is on the kind of upper left here and the female is on the right. These two are so dimorphic that they were once thought to be separate species. So the male on the left here, he's got that, he's mostly black. He's got some white in the wings, some white cheek stripes or egg white cheek stripe, a white stripe behind the eye. He's got a kind of a narrow red shin patch. He's got some yellow on the belly, and both sexes have white rump patches, which you won't always see. The female here on the right, she looks superficially somewhat similar to a northern flicker. She's got that brown head, kind of striped backside, but it's really thin, kind of black and white stripes. It's not, that brown coloration that you see in northern flickers, but also notice she's got that black breast and that yellow belly. But yeah, they look very, very dissimilar. Yeah, so much so they were once thought to be separate species. These guys are high elevation specialists. They breed in coniferous and coniferous and mixed forests at these higher elevations. They're found in the Western Sierra. They're found in the upper conifer and subalpine zones. There is some downslope movement during the winter, but for the most part, you want to go up higher if you want to see these. They are found on both slopes, but almost always you want to go up higher unless it's a really, really harsh winter. Then you can find them a little bit down lower. Their calls are pretty unique. So sapsuckers are known for having those kind of whiny, oh gosh, I'm going to try to imitate it. I know I'm going to do a bad job. The quia, quia calls. Well, the Williamson sapsucker is no exception to that. However, what makes their calls unique is that they're extra raspy. So I always say the Williamson sapsucker, when they're making those calls, they sound like a woman that's been smoking for 50 years. I mean, it's just that raspy. They also have various kind of snarling calls on their drum. It kind of follows that typical sapsucker pattern, but it's compared to, say, the red-breasted sapsucker, which also nests in the Sierra. The Williamson sapsucker's drum is definitely faster and kind of a little more controlled. Yeah, this is a species. I do have some pretty reliable areas to find them if you can access them. Sometimes, these areas are so high up, sometimes you have to wait until, well into breeding season before you can access them. So it can be a little challenging, but I know of some areas where they nest pretty reliably every year. So if any of you ever make it up this way and want to see this species, definitely let me know. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next species, which is the Clark's nutcracker. This one, definitely a little more widespread. As you can see, they occupy a fairly vast swath of Western North America. These guys are they're corvids, and as corvids go, I'd say these guys are kind of, by no means small, but they're kind of more medium sized. They've got that dagger-like beak, which is a really, really important adaptation for their lifestyle. And they've got that kind of grayish body, white undertail coverts, and a really striking black and white pattern in both the wings and tail. It really, really flashes very conspicuously in flight. And the picture there on the upper left, you can see a little bit of that pattern there with the outstretched wings. It's not the best picture, but I wanted to show that, so that was the best picture I had that showed that feature. These guys here will nest in dry, open coniferous forests. And on the western slope anyway, they breed in the upper conifer and subalpine zone. So definitely more of a high elevation species, although they are altitudinal migrants. So once they're they're done breeding, a lot of times they move downslope. They are very I'm sorry, excuse me. Their sounds, they're corvids, so we know that they're non-musical. They don't have any true songs. Their calls include these really rasping and sort of croaking kind of, I really wish I could play that, but these really loud raw and cross sounds. That's about the best I could do with that. But yeah, very, very, very distinctive. If you hear that sound, you'll know instantly. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you'll know that anything that's that loud and that raspy, like that is definitely a corvid for sure. These guys, some fun facts about these guys. So as I mentioned, their dagger-like beak is a really, really important adaptation for their life history strategy. So they use those beaks to pry open. So they eat pine seeds, and they use those beaks to pry open cones that a lot of times are unripe, and so they have to really dig into there to pry them open and extract the seeds from this cone scales. They're known for caching seeds, and of course they don't remember every, they're not able to come back and get every single seed they've cached. They don't remember every single cache site. So they actually help to maintain populations of various evergreen trees that grow at these high elevations. So these guys are not only really cool, but also an extremely important species. And another little fun fact about them is that, as I mentioned, they eat pine seeds. Well, they're not just carrying one seed at a time to the cache site. These guys are got to work smarter, not harder. So they're going to collect as many seeds as they at one time as they can, and they have a sublingual pouch, and they can actually store up to 150 seeds at a time in that pouch before they transport them to the cache site. So really, really fun fact about those guys. So we will go ahead and move on to our last species, which is the sooty grouse. And after I'm done talking to you guys about these species, I'm going to tell you a fun, well, actually, it wasn't all that much fun at the time, a story about the male pictured there on the left, about that particular individual. I had a very interesting encounter. So I'll tell you guys that story at the end. So physical description, these guys are bulky and chicken-like. They spend a lot of their time on the ground. The males are kind of grayish overall. They have a pale gray tip to the tail, yellow throat sacs, which aren't always visible, and some yellow above the eyes. The females, they're on the right, definitely not quite as ornate as males, kind of a mottled brownish overall. These guys are definitely a high elevation specialist. You can find them in coniferous forests, usually throughout their range, yes, usually in mountainous areas and the Sierras. You can find them from the upper conifer to the subalpine zones. These guys can be pretty elusive too, definitely a lot easier to hear than to see. Displaying males give these low, kind of muffled, owl-like hoots. In fact, their sounds very similar to the hoots of the great gray owl. So sometimes it can be a little tricky to differentiate. So you really got to kind of pay attention to that. Both sexes do vocalize. They'll give various kind of croaking calls. Let's see. This one, what else was I going to mention about this species? There was one fun fact I was going to mention. A few different things. So males can be very territorial, and that fact ties into the story I'm going to tell. Females with young, like the one down here on the right, that was actually a female that I found with 2 or 3 young. They could actually be really, really tame and surprisingly approachable, and that was the case with this one here. I kept a respectable distance, of course, but she didn't seem fazed at all by my presence. And breeding males, like I said, very territorial. And this male here, this one in particular, was about 7 years ago. I was with some friends. We were up in Kings Canyon National Park. We were driving down Highway 180, and one of my friends who's not a birder, goes, "Why is there a chicken?" And I knew instantly, okay, there's not a chicken. It's a grouse. I wanted to see it. So I turned the car around, and luckily there was a turnout close to the spot where he told me he'd seen it. So I figured I'd get out, take a look. I wasn't anticipating that I'd, even get a look at it. I figured it'd probably scurried down the hill by then, but I'd give it a try. Well, no. I parked my car, I got out, and this male, the one you see there in that picture, actually came trotting across the road toward me. And I'd never seen that behavior. And it pretty much launched a full-scale attack. It was chasing me, flying at me, telling me to get out of the area, but I couldn't leave because it was in control. It knew that it was in charge. But yeah, it kept flying at me and chasing me, and it was making contact with my feet, my legs. It was very, very, very maniacal, territorial sooty grouse. And this encounter lasted probably for a good 5 to 10 minutes. There were actually people passing by, and one of them stopped and pointed and laughed and then drove off. And finally, after, toward the end of the encounter, I was able to get myself in a position where I was able to run to my car and make my escape. But even as we drove away, it still chased after us for probably a good 10, 15 feet. And I actually have a video of the last 47 seconds of that encounter. So if anyone would like to see that, I'm going to share my email on the last slide. So let me know. I can share that with you. But yeah, really cool species, tend to be really elusive, a lot easier to hear than to see. This species was formerly known as the blue grouse, but it was split in 2006. So it went from being the blue grouse to the sooty grouse of the West. So you can find sooty grouse in BC, Washington, Oregon, and northern parts of California. And then there's the dusky grouse, which has kind of more of an interior west distribution. So yeah, fun little fact about that one. But that is about all that I have on the more popular targets in the Central Sierra area for the clients that I have. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen and me kind of listening to me drone on and on about these different species. I really appreciate that. So I will now open the floor for questions.
I don't have a question, but I just want to commend you on your gatekeeper policy. You know, I've seen people that should know better, you know, birders, but they just don't realize, you know, that they're getting so close that it's endangering the animal, or like you say, they can't resist, you know, making the calls to get the animal closer. So I commend you on your gatekeeper policy. I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. I really, really appreciate you saying that. I've had some people get a little irritated with me, but these were people that I was fairly certain would go and, you know, do, you know, exactly, you know, what you were just describing. So for the sake of the birds, especially because I knew they were nesting there, I felt that I had to do that.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing that with me.
Any other questions?
No, but I do want to say I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go before too many more people slip away. I'm going to flip to the have you flip to the last slide. This kind of this has my contact information. So if anyone was wanting to see that Sooty Grouse video, the last 47 seconds of that encounter, you can email me at sendcalbirdingtours@gmail.com. And you can also call or text me at 559-492-6240 or check out my website at centralcaliforniabirdingtours.com. And I see I have a comment here in the chat. It says, great presentation and stories about your bird adventures. Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that.
Just beautiful, Rachel. It makes me want to go to Central California and see this now.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff to see here, but I will caution everyone wanting to visit the region that the summers here get, in the valley especially, extremely hot. So I highly recommend spending most of your time either along the coast where it's substantially cooler, or up in the Sierras, where if you get high enough, it's much cooler up there as well. But down here in the valley in the summertime, it's oppressive for sure.
Oh yeah. Well,
Let's see, I got some comments
would
here.
you say fall is a better time, or spring, early spring?
I'd say so. For the valley itself, late fall through early spring is best for the valley itself. For the coast, really, it's kind of year round. The weather there is so mild.
Yes.
But it kind of depends on what you're wanting to see, especially if you've got a lot of shorebird targets. That's what's going to have a lot of seasonal variation. So it all depends on what you're wanting to see. A lot of like the really cool shorebirds are like surfbirds, black turnstones, wandering tattlers, things like that. That's going to be more of an overwintering thing.
Where are you headquarters? Like, where do you live?
Well, I live in Fresno, which is definitely not the most impressive part of California, I'll be perfectly honest. But what's really good about Fresno is that we're pretty centrally located from here. You can drive about 2.5 to 3 hours and you're at the coast. You can drive for about an hour and you're already at the, you know, mid elevations in the Central Sierra. So we've got, you know, we're within striking distance of a lot of really, really cool destinations. And here in the valley itself, you know, the right time of year, we've got some amazing places like the Merced National Wildlife Refuge, San Luis National Wildlife Refuge, which are just, I mean, just meccas for all these, you know, overwintering waterfowl and shorebirds. And those are both about an hour away, an hour to the north. So you've got some really, really amazing places you can get to from here. And even south of here, you know, if you go down to like the Taft or Bakersfield area, you can see some, I mean, it's not the prettiest habitat, but you can go to like some, what's it called? Saltbush scrub habitats. And you can find things like bell sparrow, LeConte's thrasher, and I mean, there's just some really awesome birding destinations that are within striking distance here. So that's the main thing that I personally really enjoy about Fresno. Let's see, we've got some comments in the chat. All right, well, thank you to everyone who listened, who took the time to thank me for that. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. It was
Oh,
great.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for
Okay.
all your help. I apologize for all the technical issues, but we got through it.
We did it. Yeah, we did.
And it went really smooth. I think it went smoothly. So I really, really appreciate your help.
All right. Well, thank you a lot.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you again.
Bye,
And
everybody.
Bye-bye.
everybody else, we've got one more presentation next month in June, and then we take a couple of months off. We'll be talking to a biologist that has studied the impact of the Southern California fires on certain bird groups. So it should be educational.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.